So, good day everyone. Today we're going to tackle about how to use assessments, and I am assigned as one of the reporters of chapter 15 that talks about integrating assessment into instruction. So, it is actually an educational reform efforts that tend to emphasize the importance of integrating assessment into instruction. So, integrating assessment into instruction actually helps in achieving four skills. It is to first integrate assessment into instruction with a cognitive approach where the focus is on helping learners become an expert. Second, integrate assessment into instruction within a constructivist approach where the focus is on helping learners construct new knowledge. And third, recognize the relevance of validity and generalizability to integrating assessment into instruction. And lastly, recognize the implications to external assessments of integrating assessment into instruction. So my part of the report is the first skill, which is to integrate assessment into instruction within a cognitive approach where the focus is on helping learners become an expert. So integrating assessment and helping learners become experts. So the research strategy widely used by the cognitive psychologists has been to identify the difference in how experts versus novices, when you say novices means freshmen or rookies or newbies, to solve problems within a particular domain. So their goal to determine the differences between experts and the novices in solving problems is because cognitive psychologists wanted to identify the gaps between the two participants for them to be able to come up with a strategy or a way to transform these learners into experts. So take for example, now if one has an understanding of the cognitive processes employed or being used by an expert, then the same processes can also be learned by others because technically experts are once learners and they're developed through different cognitive processes applied that aims learners to become experts. So when you say cognitive processes, it refers to the mental processes involved in gaining knowledge and comprehension, as it includes thinking, remembering, and problem solving. So these actually led us to declarative and procedural knowledge. They are the two basic types of knowledge that is used by experts in solving problems. And later on, we are going to dive deeper about these two basic types of knowledge as it also plays a major role in transforming novices to become experts. And it is said that any of a variety of test formats can be used to assess both declarative and procedural knowledge. So, cognitive psychologists view declarative and procedural knowledge as a means to something else, specifically solving problems. So, let us look more closely at how declarative and procedural knowledge is learned and how that knowledge is then used to solve problems. And we will also look at the implications this has to classroom assessment if assessments are to be integrated into instruction. So, let's proceed to declarative and procedural knowledge. So, declarative knowledge can be thought of a series of propositions or ideas that reside in long-term memory in order to be retained for more than a short period of time. Any new proposition must become linked to other ideas. So, to make it simple, declarative knowledge refers to facts or information stored in the memory. That is conceptual, propositional, or descriptive knowledge describes things, events, or processes, their attributes and their relation to each other, or you create linkages. So, take for example, in a classroom, you happen to study for exam about figures of speech. And for the term simile, you associated it with the word smile, no? For you to be able to remember the term. So same goes with activities. If we have a schema to a certain topic, that lesson become more memorable because you establish linkages that may associate to a certain memory. So this actually led us to the two processes, so the organization and elaboration. This too facilitates these linkages within declarative knowledge. So, organization involves dividing information into subsets and establishing a relationship among the subsets. So, this is because we tend to naturally categorize the things we see. Multiple classifications are involved, all helping us link new information to what we already know and helping us retrieve that information when we need it. So in learning there are actually numerous ways not to help students organize information. So for example, teachers can provide advanced organizers, provide a topic outline, or encourage students to outline what is being discussed. So for the elaboration is the second process that facilitates the creation of linkages with declarative knowledge. So as with organization, there are numerous ways to use elaboration to help students establish linkages. So one of the examples are teachers asking students to create their own examples of analogies, or students can be asked to anticipate missing information. So next is the procedural knowledge, and it is subdivided into three, namely discriminations, concepts, and rules. So discriminations, it is a very basic type of procedural knowledge and involves sensitivity to some attribute that is critical to later understanding of a particular concept. So take for example, the concept of small involves sensitivity to differences in size just from the word itself, no discrimination. However, discrimination involves only the ability to point to or identify in some way the object that is different and would not involve describing the difference or even recognizing it by name, as would be required in response to the question which one is smaller. For the concepts requires using a set of discriminations and meaningfully associating a name with these characters. So the concept of small, for example, involves sensitivity to size and being able to associate the word small within the context of different sizes. It involves linkages to a series of discriminations as well as to other concepts. So the concept of small involves discriminations associated with the concept of typical because, for instance, a particular car and a particular ant must both be understood as small relatives to other cars and other ants, even though a small car is very large compared to a small ant. Next is the rules. So rules is the relationships that govern or predict actions. So this includes formula governing the conversion of temperatures from the Celsius to Fahrenheit scale, or the rule that governs the use of the indefinite article a or an in a sentence, or a particular procedure in algebra used to isolate a single unknown on one side of the equation. So technically or basically it's all about the rules in a particular field in learning, obviously no. So let us proceed. So problem solving and transfer. So as noted previously, problem solving as conceptualized here is different from applying known procedures to solve a problem, such as using a formula to convert Fahrenheit to Celsius. Knowledge of rules is an important element for obtaining solutions to problems, but it is not what we're referring to here as a problem solving. So a problem exists when one has a goal but has not yet identified a means for reaching that goal. So problem solving involves establishing that means. So meaning that the problem solving in this area is determining what will be the best thing to do for us to be able to solve a certain problem. We must also depend on our declarative knowledge as it influences on how we solve a certain problem. So take for example, no? So during online classes reporting, and usa ka sa mga students with unstable internet connections, especially sa among mga case sa mga taga-province, no? So during the schedule of my reporting, there is a huge possibility good nga the internet connection might interrupt my presentation and might affect the whole session of the synchronous class. So before that happens, as an alternative plan, I will prepare a pre-recorded presentation of my report as a backup, considering the possibilities of the interruption of the connection. Since ang live broadcast kay requirement gid na siya og fast and stable internet connection, and inevitable na gid na sa among part nga magka-problema gid mi sa among connection in most cases. So the pre-recorded presentation will be posted on the G Classroom instead, para dito na lang mo watch ang instructor and so with my classmates kay in uploading makasugakod naman og post bahala na og kuan kanang hinay ang imong connection compared sa live broadcast gyud. So kay kung mag live broadcast ka magputol-putol pa ang imong tingog during synchronous classes. So maayo nang i-post na lang ang pre-recorded para masabtan gyud ang imong topic nga imong gi-report. Pareha karon nga atong gimo no, it's a pre-recorded reporting or presentation. That's it. So the point of this is that you must determine and have an alternative plan in every situation, since problems may occur during the least expected time. So our present focus is on the integration of assessment into instruction, when the purpose of instruction is to help learners become experts. So in this context, a relevant question pertains to what an expert does to solve problems. So in a broad sense, the answer is that an expert uses a high level of three types of knowledge. So first is the conceptual understanding, the second is the automated basic skills, and the third one is the knowledge of strategies. But before we proceed, we should always remember that from an instructional and assessment perspective, learning is effective only if students are able to transfer application of knowledge from the context in which it was learned to situations within which the later are expected to solve problems. So next. So first, let's start off with conceptual understanding. So with conceptual understanding, one significant issue is determining what declarative knowledge is critical to solving problems. There is general agreement that teachers must themselves be experts within the content domain they're teaching. So take for example a science teacher. So a science teacher must be knowledgeable with relevant science. However, this content expertise is often insufficient. So cognitive psychologists have found that an effective way to identify which conceptual understanding are required for transfer is to establish the kinds of declarative knowledge experts invoke when they actually solve real-world problems. That is simply asking scientists what they believe is important knowledge is not enough. Instead, one would observe what knowledge scientists use when they go about solving scientific problems, to know which conceptual understandings are crucial. Science teachers must be content experts not just with important scientific principles, but also with real-world applications of the science they're teaching. So, ano siyang conceptual understanding? It is believed that a learner is more likely to activate the necessary knowledge if that knowledge is learned within a problem-solving context. So even if a student learns appropriate declarative knowledge for a given problem-solving domain, it is quite possible the student will be unable to activate that knowledge when it is needed. Probably the reason is that if declarative knowledge is learned in that context, it is more probable that useful linkages will be made within propositions that make up this conceptual understanding. So one strategy proposed for doing this is to provide instructions within the problem context. That is, establish a problem that is to be addressed and help students achieve declarative knowledge that helps address that problem. Another strategy is for instruction to take on the form of an apprenticeship, wherein the teacher initially presents problems and models solutions and gradually shifts problem-solving responsibility to the students. And let's proceed to automated basic skills. So when you say automated basic skills, These are the skills that are applied without conscious thought. So the advantage of automated basic skills is that they're procedural techniques that can be applied efficiently, therefore allowing mental capabilities to focus on other aspects of solving the problem. So for example, driving a car on a busy road would be impossible where a number of procedural skills are not automated. A procedural skill generalizes to many problem settings and does not have to be relearned for each. As with conceptual understanding, however, one must activate an appropriate basic skill when needed. Part of knowing which basic skills to use involves knowledge of strategies. It also involves establishing linkages between the skills and their various applications. Again, a teacher must be familiar with diverse real world settings to which a particular procedure applies and help students learn procedures within those varied contexts. So let's proceed to strategies. So, when solving a problem, an expert develops and uses strategies to make more efficient and effective the search for relevant knowledge and the evaluation of possible solutions. So, one important characteristic of experts within this and other fields is that they know useful strategies for getting the work done, and they know how to apply a particular strategy. When learning strategies, in order to assist with transfer, students must learn when and how to use strategies. Learning a strategy involves knowing the steps to follow, and it is important to remain mentally involved when they're used. One must evaluate whether steps are being applied appropriately, whether they're having the intended effect, and whether in fact they appear appropriate within the context of the problem being solved. And lastly, according to Gani, Yukevich, and Nikevich, that a possible reason many people fail to transfer strategies is that they do not know when the strategy should be used. They point out the need to show students why a strategy works and provide understanding associated with implementing the strategy effectively. And next is here are some implications to classroom assessments. So, when the focus is on helping learners become experts, there are a number of implications to how one assesses students if the assessment is to be integrated into instruction. So, first, experts rely heavily on declarative and procedural knowledge. So, although problem solving skills are the ultimate goal, such skills cannot be realized without the essential declarative and procedural knowledge. Declarative and procedural knowledge must be assessed along with problem-solving skills. Declarative knowledge is assessed by having students state or explain what they know, while procedural knowledge is assessed by having students perform the procedure. Number 2. The need to rely heavily on informal assessments to verify students are forming linkages necessary to retain information in long-term memory. Students must be able to recall declarative knowledge when it is needed for solving problems. For this to happen, students must establish for each idea they learn links to existing knowledge. Two techniques we have identified that help establish links, which are organization of knowledge and elaboration. Third, procedural knowledge should not become automated. So many procedural skills become automated, however, procedural rules that become domain-specific strategies should not. Through informal assessments, a teacher needs to establish that students are learning when to apply a given strategy and that students are deliberately evaluating whether the strategy is achieving its anticipated outcome. Fourth, assessments, particularly those are informal, must be non-threatening to students. One of the characteristics of informal assessments addressed in Chapter 11 is that they are interactive between the teacher and the students and among students. This characteristic is necessary, for instance, for assisting students' elaborations when they establish linkages between new declarative knowledge and existing knowledge. So in order to sustain students' participation, they must be comfortable making and learning from mistakes. The focus of assessment must, from the perspective of students, obviously be one of facilitating learning rather than one of making judgments. Fifth, The outcomes of assessments should involve qualitative descriptions of what students do and do not do. Qualitative descriptions provide a much more useful basis for interacting with students. A numerical score does not add information that is not already contained in a careful qualitative statement of what is observed, and can be dispensed with unless a summary record must be retained in that form. Focusing on the qualitative interpretations of student performance makes it easier to blur the distinction between instruction and assessment, which is good. It also makes it easier for a teacher to establish that the assessments are being used to facilitate learning rather than focus on inadequacies. Inadequacies. And lastly, number 6, performance performance assessment should be a significant assessment tool at all grade levels and within all content areas. So performance assessments are the only assessment options for evaluating problem-solving skills. Performance assessments can be incorporated into a portfolio system. It is also an indirect indication of what a student knows and what the student is thinking. A performance assessment needs to be structured so that the behaviors observed provide a valid indication of those processes, and one that generalizes reasonably well to other performance the student might have been asked to perform. Using the performance assessment specifications illustrated in Chapter 13 can help structure the assessments so that they have these attributes. And to summarize the topic, cognitive approach asserted that experts uses the two basic types of knowledge, which are the declarative and procedural knowledge in solving problems. And these cognitive processes that was used by experts should also be used by learners. Moreover, we should always remember that learning is effective only if students are able to transfer applications of knowledge from the context in which it was learned to situations within which they later are expected to solve problems. So that will be the end of my report, and thank you.